wearing red.
Yeah, except you. Welcome, everybody. I don't know if anyone in the audience is wearing red and whether that...
Yeah.
Welcome, Bill, Andrea. Absolutely lovely to have you here. Welcome to everybody who's joining us. While you're joining, I'm just going to introduce a little bit. It's a WordLift monthly roundtable. We're now doing these as a second double bill, as the name implies, on Tuesdays, the second Tuesday of every month, alongside our normal Kalicube Tuesdays. Today, it's Making Multi-Modal Matter in SEO, which is a great title that Andrea wrote. I'm really pleased. I'm going to give you the song, but I'm going to give it, I've never done this before, the song for two people. A quick hello and we're good to go. Welcome to the show, Andrea and Bill.
It was good.
Yeah, makes sense, doesn't it? I obviously can't do it with whole crowds of people, but it works for two people. Super duper. So, Andrea, for people who don't know you, can you quickly present yourself?
Yeah, I'm CEO and co-founder of WordLift, and we specialized in SEO automation with knowledge graphs.
Brilliant stuff. And Bill, I know you. Does everybody in the audience know you? I think probably not. So would you like to just say who you are?
Sure. I'm the writer at SEO by the Sea. I've been there for 15 years, 16. And I'm the director of SEO research at Go Fish Digital, which means I find it important to keep an eye on patents and papers as they come out. And there was a recent patent about Mum and how it's used with automated assistants, which was really interesting. That came out about a month ago or so.
Right.
And it's fun seeing this in action. And I'm looking forward to having some conversations with my speaker device sometime soon.
Yeah. I had a quick look at your article and then watched the presentation that you linked to with Google, and it was phenomenally interesting. And I'm really looking forward to talking about that. And we're going to start off with a presentation from Andrea. You showed it to me the other day, and it really does make this clear. So if you'd like to give that presentation, it gives the context to the discussion afterwards. And then we're going to get Bill in talking about the patents and what he understands about how it all functions behind the scenes. Andrea, as you said rightly, you're doing much more of the testing from the other side, which is looking to see what happens, whereas Bill's looking more at the algorithms and the patents behind it. So are we sharing the screen? Anton, thank you.
Yep.
Brilliant.
Good. So this is just a quick introduction to share some concept around what we're going to talk about today. So what is a multimodal system in the context of search? And one of the aspects of a multimodal system is that it can leverage on multiple senses. We are used to think of a search engine as a way of extracting relevant textual document. But if we get multisensorial, then that means that we can work in terms of content across multiple modalities, whether this is an audio file, it's a snippet of a video, it's an image, or a book. Now, usually when we design a search engine and that is multimodal, we can work with, let's say, a query that is an image. And Google does this already with tools like Google Lens, where I can point and shoot a photo, and then a similar image will be recognized. This is also done by Amazon with their own shopping application. Now, in a multimodal search, we don't want just to work with something like an image query, but we want to actually start combining modalities. And that's when things get more interesting, and that's more kind of the context of what we understood of Google Mom. Because in the example that they originally shared, they start from a user that capture a video of a bicycle wheel and then makes a query. Now, when doing this, so this is an example of a multimodal search that we are implementing with a technology partner called Gen AI, when we do this, basically we want to create a combined vector space. So imagine a matrix of meanings that it's capable of understanding both the visual content and the textual content. So if I get the same image that I got in the first example and I augmented with a textual query to add the information about the color red, I will get dresses that have the similar pattern, but in red. So the user is providing the query, but rather than writing as we're used to, it's printing first a picture and then it's sending a snippet of text or maybe it's interacting with the voice. So we have two modalities at play, and this is an example of an implementation of a multimodal search. Now, when we get into studying multimodality, we also want to understand, okay, how does it change and how can I benefit from this different approach of, finding relevant content in the context of SEO. And so I've been recently working on running tests on Google Lens because more people are coming to us asking, how can we optimize content for Google Lenses? And so I started to do some tests. And I'm just going to quickly share one of the tests that I recently made in Munich, because the answer is yes, we can actually optimize our content for Google Lenses. And the point is that we want to help the AI to be trained by using semantic meanings behind these images and behind these videos that we are producing. So when I went back in October in Munich to one of our clients there, they had a beautiful graffiti on just in front of their office, and they have multiple outlets. It's a very well established media company. So immediately I went on and I made a search, starting with my phone by shooting a photo of these amazing graffiti, and they were not ranking to the top. So none of these first results were coming out of their properties, and quite interesting. Alamy was one of the top ranking site, because Alamy is an amazing website that collects images and that does an amazing SEO work for promoting these images. And I don't know if the team from Alamy is here, but yeah, maybe Roxana is there. Hope so. But anyway, it's good because we know that Alamy is doing an amazing job there. But of course, now my goal was to see how can we help this publisher kind of rank back to the top. And so I convinced the team on running the experiment, and I started to contribute more photos to one of the articles that could have ranked on Google Lenses. And as you can see, after a few months, and I have to say that I was hi, Roxana, I spotted you. And this example is actually an example of how great you're working there, because I had to kind of work against you, but I did it only for this image, and it was fun. But yeah, I saw that. I thought about you when we ran this experiment. So what did we do in order to get better than Alamy here? So the main aspect, there are two aspects. So one aspect is that, of course, we have to enrich the structured data behind these images in order for Google to gain the confidence that first, the image were cleared of any right, so they could be used. And second, that the image were really representing, that specific entity within that specific geographic location. So we added as many information as possible using structured data markup, right clearance. Then we added the multiple formats for the image to be seen. And this is not actually the final setup. It's a subset of the information that are present, have been present on the page. And most importantly, we added different perspective of the same image, because as you can understand, if I need to train a model that is able to recognize an image, the model will benefit from high quality images, but also from multiple perspectives of the same object. And then after a few months, we were able to get to the point of outranking Alamy. And now we remove the structured data, and I'm going to see if this is going to stick or this is not going to stick. I have a question here for Bill, though, and I don't know if I can ask. But one thing that I realized when doing this experiment is that we are used to face indexation issues with Google. So we go live with a piece of content, and then we have to work on our SEO strategy in order for Google to pick up the content and then show it on the result. Whatever rankings we get. But what does happen when we have to actually expect not only Google to pick up the content, but we have to expect Google to retrain a model like the one that Lens uses for showing the list of images?
It's impossible to tell you step by step how that works, how that functions. We've had a history of how Google Lens supposedly recognizes entities in images, and that has to do with entity IDs being recognized in a query, and then from the query a search that uncovers the page that contains that entity. So if you do a search for instance, a band, Google Lens is supposedly able to show you information like conference dates associated with that band based upon the entity ID that goes with the ticket sales. So Google's putting those pieces together to show a complete understanding of what's going on with Lens. Now, BERT, we're told that Mum is 1,000 times more powerful than BERT. And I think that's important to say because the multimodality of Mum means that we see a lot more dimensions of elements than we do with BERT. We see more aspects. We see not only the verbal, but also the visual, the oral. We hear sounds, we see images, we see multiple perspectives. And that's what really makes the difference between what BERT does and what Mum does. And it enables someone like an automated assistant to actually have conversations and interact and beats of speech tag parts of your conversation that you're having with the search engine during the conversation with the automated assistant, so it understands everything you're asking and what you're referring to. It's a complex process, but it's that connection is essential. The machine ID, the entity connection, and Google
that's what I thought, because so my assumption, and you're kind of confirming that, is that in order for a model to be more easily trained or retrained on the recognition of a specific asset, is that the presence of an entity, in a way, it facilitates the recognition of the object. So in this specific Morales aspect, the important part is that the Morales depicts an historical figure, which is Georg Elser. And Georg Elser has been someone that tried to kill Adolf Hitler. And so in a way, the machine is helped by the presence of the entity ID, because he can more quickly recognize that that is the thing that you're looking at. And so that's why by adding the structured data, we had this effect of kind of getting into that. But of course, it took a few months The article that I used wasn't, of course, was dated when the Morales was published, and even though we refreshed it with new content with my additional images, it still took months before we could get back on the top and kind of show that it worked.
If we go back to the earliest days of Freebase and Metafilter at Google, and they talk about in their patent for that discusses machine IDs, they talk about entity ID for Arnold Schwarzenegger and how he's recognized even though he undergoes many different names because he has different movie roles, and he's known as the Terminator, Kindergarten Cop, and so on. And you refer to him in a web page, it's supposed to show the entity ID for Schwarzenegger because it's one person, it's one thing that helps searchers understand that the same person is being talked about, even though he's referred to under a different name. So when they started talking about Lens and how Lens is using those machine IDs for entities, is Google going to be able to make these connections? And that's when using schema and showing the entity IDs and same as IDs for entities in which you're presenting about became important because Google is able to make those connections.
Yeah, and using those IDs in the schema markup both informs Google, but if Google's already understood, it reassures Google that it's correctly understood. And I think kind of a lot of us miss that, the importance of that confidence, that reassurance. Once again, Google's a child, and reassuring it about its understanding is a really important aspect of educating a child, the child that is Google.
When we talk about local search, we talk about NAP, we talk about consistency between facts and entities. And that's what builds up the confidence, showing that information over and over and over again, multiple sources.
Right. So we're only like 10 years behind local search people in terms of building up confidence in understanding of entities. Not too bad, 10 years too late. Sorry, Andrea, did you want to carry on with the presentation?
As you like. I mean, there is another aspect of Google MUM that kind of fascinates me, which is this aspect of conversational AI.
Yeah.
And so this is kind of another concept that I wanted to add, to this conversation. So when we talk about conversational artificial intelligence, we're really talking about the idea of having a dialogue with the machine, and this is now possible with the latest state-of-the-art language models. But then we're also seeing that in reality, these language models deeply need a knowledge base that can be used as a source. Now, this is interesting.
Part of the knowledge is Google tagging your conversation, so it understands things like pronouns when you ask questions, and when you're talking about, say, for instance, Barack Obama, and then you ask Google, who is he married to?
Right.
And Google's supposed to understand the pronoun, the co-reference there. He means Barack Obama, and Google's tagging is making knowledge base right as you're talking.
Right.
Your conversation becomes part of the knowledge base.
Right, because if I understand correctly, in MUM, one of the important aspects is this ability of the search engine to act as an expert agent, which means that it's capable of multiple turn conversation and follows you along the journey. As you said, if I talk about the entity Barack Obama, then I don't need to reference Barack Obama. I can say he, and Google will understand that I'm referencing the entity. So in a conversational AI, really, we have intents, and then we have entities, and then we have slots.
And Google's also understanding stuff like emphasis when you're talking. And they can distinguish between two different people by which you emphasize.
Right. So,
oh, sorry, I actually, my sister worked with somebody, or a friend of hers worked for Alexa, and they're investing vast amounts of money to get that emphasis. And she was actually saying exactly what you're saying. He said, basically what I'm studying is how to identify somebody by emphasis and gaps in words and ums and ahs and all of those little texts we have in our speech.
Yeah.
Brilliant. I love that idea. Well, obviously not. It's incredibly interesting.
Google's also talked about using accents to personalize search results too.
Oh,
so
right.
it's interesting seeing what they're doing with all that processing, with all of the stuff we would consider noise in queries. It's not necessarily noise to the right person. One man's trash is another man's treasure, right?
Right.
that's true.
No, and lots of all that, the hidden meaning and kind of all the different ways that we express things, I think is something we overlook. We focus a lot on words. But obviously in conversational, for the minute, that's fairly limited, or is it actually quite advanced at the moment?
It's a good question. None of us actually work at Google. We aren't seeing cutting edge as it's developing.
I mean, I use Descript to do the transcripts for these things, and they have an option to take out the filler words. And obviously, Descript is a small company, AI company. They don't have the masses of resources that Google, or the experience of Google or an Amazon, and they actually do it very well. With Andrea's accent, it doesn't do it quite as well as with mine, and I think that's to do with the Anglophone accent. And the British accent, perhaps the American accent, is going to be easier for these machines to understand, which is kind of going to skew things for a lot of people in conversational search.
It is a big topic. I mean, kind of getting out of the problem of having data and training data biased to Anglo-Saxon English. It's a big topic in general in search. Of course, as we get more long tail or more conversational, it plays an even more important role. And we know that, of course, we do have a Wikipedia version in dialects of Italians, like Sardinian. There is a version of Wikipedia that uses the language they speak in a small island in Italy. So there is a knowledge, but of course it's a limited amount compared to what we have in the main languages, and that's a big challenge, of course. Absolutely.
But it isn't part of MUM being able to do this whole thing multilingually, and that kind of difference in language is no longer, you would no longer be looking at Google and saying, it's a child and it's Anglophone. You'd be saying, it's a child and it's multilingual.
The video from Google says that they are able to simultaneously handle 75 different languages.
Right.
And it's understand languages. We don't know if that's understand the vocal nuances.
Yeah, I think it's, the multilinguality aspect is really crucial, because if we have worked before in terms of going towards a specific index in a specific language, now it's changing completely the game, because we are becoming more language agnostic with multilinguality. Because, of course, I can have a content that is written in Italian, but it's easily searchable as much as the content that is written in English. And in our own experiments with developing multi-modal and multilingual search engine, we already see that it's very easy to encode a piece of text in Greek or a piece of text in Italian and making it queryable, for instance, in German. And this is, of course, happening already behind the scenes in Google, and it's been happening possibly for several numbers of years already, which means that we are not ranking just, and competing only with the content written in our own language. But in reality, the understanding of the topic, it can be derived from other languages as well.
Right. I mean, and from my perspective, in the brand cert world and knowledge panel world, especially the knowledge panel world, you see that there is a large difference in the number of knowledge panels in English in Anglophone countries that tend to go across the world, and the number of knowledge panels in specific geo regions and languages such as Italy, and for personalities or companies in Italy or in Germany or in Spain in Spanish. So kind of that bias, I mean, I need to look into it and see, is Google getting better at reducing that bias? Because right now, the Anglophone bias is quite phenomenal.
Yep.
Right. Should we go back to the talk, or are we going to carry on? Because the other thing I was thinking about is what struck me about the presentation that Bill just mentioned from Google is that it's multi-modal and multitasking, and I think that's kind of, we focused maybe on the multitasking, the multimodal thing, but the idea that it's multitasking and bringing in content from different sources to bring it together, is that going to mean that the SERP will become more like the knowledge panel, which is multiple sources being brought together into one single result?
The conversations you could supposedly have with mom could include resources that in a language that you're not conversant with at all. An example they provided was Japanese content from a Japanese website that answers your questions about climbing Mount Fuji.
Right.
And you're going to get more insights possibly from that Japanese website because it's possibly more related to the content.
Right. So bringing in the replies from other languages means basically Google's going to have even more information, data, and possibilities. And as Andrea said, we're competing with an even bigger mass of content, which potentially makes it more difficult. Oh dear. So did you want to carry on with, sorry, go ahead, Andrea.
Yeah, yes and no. I mean, it's more difficult, but also it's more comprehensive. I think that the fact that a machine can derive information from multiple language can be in the end beneficial for SEO, because it means that the machine understands the topic with you know, in a better way, because at the moment we also struggle with the fact that sometimes the intent it's poorly recognized and detected. Right. Whether these going across languages could actually benefit the way in which the machine understands the topic, and therefore the way in which results can be ranked.
Right. Okay. And I mean, Bill, from you were talking about kind of the idea of Google answering questions, pulling in different informations, and Andrea, you're talking about a path. I'm really intrigued by the idea I gave as an example to a guy from Bing, the idea that if I start searching to learn to play the bass and I'm a beginner, it gives me beginner results. And as I move forward through my search history over multiple months, are we going to be seeing that Google will then presumably notice that I've become more proficient at the bass and will then start ranking the more proficient bassist results towards the top and take me on a journey? Sorry, go ahead, Bill.
We've seen that possibly in some of the patents, but we don't know if that's actually been implemented. For instance, there's one patent that Google talks about with automated assistants working with kids, and it recognizes the sophistication of those kids and their ability to understand answers. And Google providing information that's appropriate for the people who are doing searches. And it may provide less sophisticated answers for kids than adults.
Right. Well, that's a good point. So, and to do with both our search history and also what it knows about us. And Andy, are you going to show the demo? Sorry, that you were showing us earlier on? I found that really interesting.
Yeah. I'm trying to restart it. That's why you look at it. I was kind of playing with it, but we can carry on with the conversation, and then as soon as I'm ready with the demo, we can run the demo. In any case, we have a slide with that.
Well, in that case, while you reboot it, Bill, can I just ask you a really quick question that's intrigued me? Is I was talking about knowledge panels earlier on. It occurred to me when I was watching the video that you shared with me through your article that this is a massive shift for knowledge panels, because it means that knowledge panels are going to become, or would presumably become, much richer and much more informative for entity-based queries where we're just looking for information.
To some degree, we as searchers are part of this ecosystem.
Right.
An essential part. We need to provide the information that makes search richer. We need to provide more sophisticated schema, more product information of more levels. I talk about Zen Luna Dong and how she's moved from Google to Amazon and is providing help with the product knowledge base at Amazon. And they're looking at more levels of sophistication. They're looking at things like G10s and providing those for products. When you go to a Zappos in e-commerce and you look up shoes, they like to show pictures of more than one picture of a shoe to give you a sense of what you're buying. And that provides you with the richer amount of information. You see the top of the shoes, the sides of the shoes, the soles. You get more perspectives, which is the difference between mom and BERT. You're getting more dimensions. You're getting the ability to look at more things, to hear audio, to not just see video and not just see lots of different perspectives. You're getting richer amounts of information. So you're not just getting better answers, you're getting more comprehensive answers.
Right. And that kind of the different perspective of shoes, and it goes back to what Andrea was saying about the mural that he took in his photo. He took multiple angles. Is that what we're going to now have to do for all our products and even ourselves? Make sure that we have multiple angles of a person, a product, or whatever, and present that to Google so it can train, or we are training it.
I don't think that Google can recognize you without the red shirt, for instance, Jason. If I can give you an SEO advice,
Well, I think the red shirt definitely helps, but in fact, using the same photo across all these different platforms pretty much has helped me get the right photos in my knowledge panel, but doesn't necessarily help Google recognize me in different photos if somebody takes a picture of me at a conference, heaven forbid, without the red shirt.
Yeah, that's the point. That's a good point.
Yeah. Oh, right. So I better get some photos out there with me in a brown shirt and a blue shirt to make sure it can recognize it. And then take somewhere I'm happy, somewhere I'm sad. Because I did notice that with Bill, interesting enough, when we did a reverse image lookup, it could get you most of the time. And for me, it kept saying old man when I didn't have the red shirt on.
Well, Bill is very visible because I could trace back photos of Bill with Neil Patel back in the days. So and Google easily recognizes you over time. That's very interesting. Yeah, it's interesting because, of course, Bill has been around for a lot longer than anyone else. Maybe Neil Patel has been a little longer. I don't know. You both look young in that photo, but it's interesting that, of course, the machine is trained with multiple occurrences of the same entity, and so the richer are these occurrences, the better the understanding gets.
I do remember the first presentation I saw Neil give, which was at a WordPress conference in San Francisco, and he was 21, and this was in 2006. So I was around a little bit. I was around about a decade before that, but the industry's been growing.
Right, yeah, I was around a decade before that as well, but I was a blue dog, so it doesn't have any pictures of me except as a blue dog, and it recognizes the blue dog no problem at all. So that diverged. I was thinking about something else to do with images. Is you were basically talking about high resolution images, and that goes against the traditional SEO idea of having super optimized images to make your website load faster. And that contradiction. Sorry,
depends on who you are.
Right.
If you're someone like Jacob Nielsen and you had a usability site, he had an about page where he had a link to a high profile image of him for use with print publications. Most SEOs don't really care about print publications.
Right. Oh, right. Yeah. So you need to play on both platforms, as it were, or both angles of it. Multiple pictures, multiple angles, and Google.
Well, there is an aspect. Yeah, that's the photo.
Bill,
that's
Bill
the photo.
Yeah,
that's the photo I was referring to. Yeah.
Brilliant.
So one aspect when I say it about high-res images is that we know, for instance, for the ability of Google to index video content, that we need to be able to provide access to the raw video content and not just the stream content. So the same applies, of course, to images as well. If the machine is capable of getting to the source, then it will kind of resample the image and retrain the model. But if we squeeze it too much because we want to optimize the performance, then it would be harder for the machine to be able to detect the features. Because of course, every pipeline will have a different way of recompressing the image. But if the the source it's not high resolution, then the compression will create a low quality image, and therefore it will not impact the training again.
Right, which would imply that the solution, well, one possible solution would be to have on the page the lower resolution image, and then in the schema identifying multiple other images, multiple angles, and high resolution.
That's exactly in my example. The same photo is provided 3 times with different renditions inside the structured data. The users only see one, but the machine is capable of detecting the different sources. The same will apply to the video object markup. When we use it in structured data, we want Google now to see the raw source of the video so that it can automatically index the chapter inside the video without us pointing, the different markers.
Brilliant. Okay. Should we go back to your presentation?
Sure. Get back. I'm still downloading the model, but I think besides looking at live here, we have an interaction of with these Blender bot, and the reason I'm playing with Blender bot is to really understand what does conversational search means, and how should we optimize content when content needs to be read by a smart agent. So here we have a library which is called is provided by the Facebook Artificial Intelligence Research Team. It's open source. It's a framework that everyone can use, and particularly this Blender bot 2 is an open domain virtual agent. Open domain means that I can ask any questions. Traditional chatbots are designed around intents, so specific action that they can perform. But an open domain needs to be able to understand anything. And so here I am asking, what is conversational AI? And the Blender bot is getting the answer by reading Google SERP, the top results, and then using a language model, it's compressing and it's transforming everything into a sentence. It's also retaining the memory of what I've asked before. And so this will kind of change the course of the conversation regardless of the data. And here it's interesting, of course, there is a work being done in these conversational agents to make sure that we don't get racist or biased information, which still, of course, happens. And here you say that it's potentially unsafe. It's a message that the bot is bringing because it's referencing about, it's talking about AI and humans, which can be sensitive. Okay, and so there is a warning there. But then I try to ask, if Google Mom is using conversational AI, and then the answer is quite interesting because they say, I'm not sure, but I know that Google is using it to improve their search result. And that means that, the system has been able to read the top results, which possibly include, the Google I/O announcement of Mom, and to, quickly synthesize and provide an answer for these questions. And then I go on and I ask to get more details. And then, as more details, I understand that, of course, conversational AI uses natural language processing and machine learning to improve the user experience. I find this fascinating because I'm experimenting with different topics and with different stories in order to understand what do I need to do for, something like this to provide me, to provide the required visibility for the content that I have. And we can look at the next slide. because basically this is already happening thanks to Google Mom when we make a query on Google. So here we have a very simple query like Kalicube Tuesday, which is this series of event, and then I can immediately see that Google is pulling the information from its own knowledge graph in order to suggest me a refinement of this query, which will lead me to this to today's webinar. And this is a way in which search is already becoming conversational, as Bill was saying before.
I added FrameNet to the chat for this. There is one Google patent that refers to FrameNet, which is a project at Berkeley. And it's a way of understanding different conversations between different business people type. So if you have two restaurant workers talking together, they're going to talk about restaurants in a way that is unique to restaurant workers. It's understandable between cooks that may not be quite as understandable between people who aren't working in restaurants and aren't familiar with the jargon or the terms of that language. And jargon is important for conversations. It helps understand, and it's possibly important for classification of websites too, because you have experts who speak in a certain way about certain topics that is unique to them, and be able to understand that those frames as part of the conversation means you can understand the people involved in the conversation better.
Right, and that kind of comes back to the question as well, is that traditionally in SEO over the last few years, people have been saying, oh, write for Google like it's a 16-year-old child. And so kind of people get rid of all the complicated words. But now we're in a situation where the context cloud, the words that you use, the vocabulary you use, don't need to be simple. They just need to be simple for the audience you're addressing. Is that correct?
It's like AJ Khan refers to his website as blind 5-year-old. He's referring to search engines with that metaphor. And he's saying search engines are users of your website too. They have their own disabilities, their own limitations, and their own special needs. So they're also in need of accessibility because they don't understand everything either.
Right.
We're feeding them. We provide schema, which is machine language. It's not intended for a wide audience. We don't have to worry about accessibility tools for machine readable only content like XML sitemaps or schema, because they're our audience who we're trying to inform, and we're trying to make it easier for them to provide better search.
Right. Okay. Brilliant. Back to Andy.
Yeah. I'm also I'm also able to share quickly the demo, but I wanted just to finish with the slides, and then we can kind of play together.
Oh, and then we can see the live demo. How exciting!
Yeah, then we can play with something live. So so this idea of the topic zooming is that, of course, Google is refining the queries, and how it is happening. It's really happening because JSON is organizing the content in a structured form. And now Google is picking up the structure, and it's using the structure to converse with the user, to open a new path. Because I might not know about today's episode, but I know about the Kalicube Tuesday series. And I'm discovering these because of these, structure that the model is capable of understanding. And therefore, we are exploring more information. And this is, I think it's also the reason why we're getting more and more long tail.
Right.
Bill, do you think?
Sorry, one point there is I'm actually structuring the data using WordLift, so it's kind of a bit of a cheat because I don't do very much. WordLift does all the heavy lifting, as the name suggests. And what has been really interesting.
I had one question for Bill, because here I look at these examples of the topic zooming, which is one of the features that we know are using Google Mom. But I was interested to see that it is also impacting on the site links. Are there any evidence of the site links being somehow updated by similar algorithm?
There is evidence of site links being updated by search history.
Right. Okay. So that could explain the way in which, because see here the site links on mobile make the upcoming event appearing, which I find it fascinating, because if you're doing what Jason is doing, it's great that the site adjust over time the site links with the upcoming event. I found this very brilliant, and I was gonna ask Jason, tell me how you're doing this, because that's fascinating. But then when I found about the topic zooming, then I realized that, okay, Google really understood, the way in which the content is structured. And so it's actually helping the reader discover things that otherwise, the reader doesn't even know about.
Right. I'll tell you one thing about that I found interesting. I look at brand SERPs all day long and I navigate around them. And what happens is you go from one link to another. You click what I call knowledge panel hopping. You click on a link in the knowledge panel, an attribute, for example, or a related entity, and then you come back and it shows you different information and more suggestions. And as you keep doing that through multiple people or multiple entities or multiple companies, it will A, show you that it's digging down, and B, start suggesting things that are related with the carousels at the top based on your search history and not based on the actual click you just made, if that makes sense. Yeah,
that's what Bill also said, that search history could also kind of drive that experience. So can we optimize for topic zooming? I think that this is a clear example that we can, that Jason is doing that, and I think he knows more about it than anyone else, about how to structure this conversation that in a way it's based on the data in the knowledge graph.
Yeah, well, I mean, the knowledge graph, and also, I mean, you can see that with the knowledge panels. I mean, I was talking to you, Bill, about that, the way Google's building the knowledge panels, and that gives you a great insight into what Google thinks people think are interesting about that entity or that topic. And then you can focus in on the things that are interesting. And with Kalicube, what we now do is analyze the industry and the entity type and the geo region to pull up all the attributes we see in knowledge panels across, like let's say 1,000 different entities, which then gives you a list of the information that Google has understood about these entities and that it is presenting because it thinks it's important for different entities in different circumstances for different users. And that gives you a really good illustration of what information, what attributes Google is looking for within your industry, what I'm calling entity equivalents, geo, entity type, and industry being the same.
And Google is crowdsourcing query sessions, query logs as you go. It's looking at what searchers are looking for. And providing a reflection of that type of information in what it shows in query templates and query logs and determinations of what data to show in a knowledge panel.
Sure, and especially when you're saying, Bill, that the people also search for is especially influenced by that.
I'm still trying to figure that out with the people in my knowledge panel. It's like George Orwell and Gene Roddenberry and Steve Jobs are people who also search for when someone looks for me. I don't quite understand that, but
well, I mean, for me, it's a mixture of related searches from that query pool that you're talking about, plus how close it thinks the relationship is, plus is the entity trending within whatever kind of category you're looking at, because it will pull it up. So there are those three aspects, and that makes them, for me at least, so far, the most difficult aspect of a knowledge panel to have any influence over. I mean, I'm struggling to decently influence the people also search for. I've got you on them, and so I'm happy with that. But Andrea went missing, and I want him back. Jeannie was asking, does Google dig down as you hop around the entities, even when you come back and search? And the answer is yes, within the same session. Doesn't seem to do it, from my experience at least, just me doing it from day to day. It doesn't seem to do it across sessions. But if I've been searching for Bill, then I search for Andrea, then I search for Rand Fishkin, it's going to bring those three together and start presenting carousels at the top, even though I've opened a new, or I've researched in the bar, and it's not just a question of entity knowledge panel hopping that I tend to do. So I'm seeing that a lot. And I'm also seeing, as you said, Andrea, the site links adapting as I skip backwards and forwards. And the order of the results adapting. And when you click on the filter pills in the knowledge panel, you click on for example, I was doing it with David Amerland earlier on, you click on books, it gives one set of results from the filter pill in the knowledge panel. Then you search for David Amerland books, and it gives you a different set of results. So the context of what you're searching and what you've been doing previously and which element of the SERP you have clicked on changes vastly the actual results, or at least the order of the results that Google's presenting. So it's building the SERP, the anatomy of the SERP, depending on your behavior around the previous SERP, what you clicked on, and what you've been searching for within that session. I love this stuff. Sorry, we're going back to the screen. Oh, Jason's touching on those. How are you automating the mining of data? Oh, how am I automating the data? I've got 70,000 entities in a database that I collected 2 or 3 years ago, and we use Authoritas to pull the SERPs in, the brand SERPs in every single month. We store it all in a database. I'm afraid this isn't big data and BigQuery, it's MySQL relational database. And then I build the code that makes all the connections, extracts the information that makes the connections to understand what Google is doing on a more macro level than just my entity hopping that I was just describing then. And it's really good fun. And I wish I could spend my whole life doing it instead of actually making a living.
You're getting there.
Yeah, I'm not far.
I think you're not far. So I brought back in BlenderBot 2, and I think someone asked if I trust it. No, I don't. I don't trust virtual agents. I'm just trying to understand how they work and how we can make them better. But I started with the question that, so yes, no, I don't trust BlenderBot. And in general, I already found many biases in favor of Facebook. As previously shared. So the question, I started with the conversation. And again, what is interesting here is that the context of the conversation, it's also driving the responses, even though the source of the responses is always Google SERP. The way in which these responses are interpreted by the model changes according to the course of the conversation. So here I'm starting with the question that Jason made: is Google getting better at reducing its biases? And the answer is, I don't think it's getting better. It's just getting worse. But again, this is kind of a potentially unsafe, so it's perceived as something that, well, maybe might not be good. So then if you see, I'm moving on and I'm asking, who is Jason Barnard and what does he do? Because I want to understand, can a machine understand the person behind the search results? And it's great because here is saying Jason Barnard is a digital marketer, first attributes, and then musician and a blue dog. And then it's asking me, do you know him? And that's kind of fascinating because, of course, I know him. And I say, yes, I do. It's great. And then he responds, I'm glad you think so. What do you do for a living? Do you have any hobbies? And then I wrote, I like to do SEO. And then it says, that sounds like a lot of fun. How long have you been doing? And so it's kind of getting more into the conversation and less into the results. But then I asked, do you know any good SEO that I should follow? And last time he proposed me Mark Zuckerberg as an SEO, and I kind of didn't rely much on that response. but I found it funny. And now it's getting better, and it's saying, well, you should check out Google. They have great resources, which of course it's true. And then I'm asking, what is WordLift? And then I say, well, I don't know what that is, but I just know that it helps with search engine optimization. In a way, this is telling me that, yes, I mean, we're doing a decent job in presenting our brand, but definitely Jason, it's doing something better because it's simpler for the machine to respond about, who is Jason Barner, then, what does WordLift do?
And is this simply, or it's a Facebook algorithm analyzing what appears on a SERP?
So yeah, let me get through the code a little bit, because I don't want to dig too much into it, but it's interesting that to understand that here we have a search engine, we have a procedure that has to dig into Google SERP, and then has to render the results that then the Personalize model interprets in order to run the conversation. And so the source of the data, it's actually a query on Google SERP, and I have it somewhere about.
Which would explain why it understands me relatively well, because I've spent a lot of time and effort controlling my brand SERP. So
yeah,
presumably would have searched for me and immediately come up with a very consistent message that's quite clear.
Right. So you can see here in this query that I'm running a query, and there is basically a web service inside that is responding me with with the results with the top result for that query, and these top results are coming from Google search. I'm testing various configuration. You can also run it on your own internal search. You can run it on Bing. The source of the data, it really can be different, but I'm using Google because I want to understand, how can we optimize the content in such a way that, for instance, if I ask to a virtual agent what is WordLift, it will provide me, with the best definition for a product, much like it's doing now for Jason. So, do you have any additional question that we should ask Blender?
Can I ask you to try something? I've got no idea how this is going to work. Can you just try typing? Do you know what WordLift does with a small w? So there's no capitalization on the name, so it's not a proper noun anymore. I mean, it might make no difference, but I'm kind of wondering how much that capitalization affects the fact that it understands that it's an entity.
Yeah, I don't think that Personalize has the understanding of entities, to be honest.
Oh, right.
I mean, and that's where, of course, a more evolved conversational AI would make the difference, is the fact that it will use entities. So, yeah, it's pretty much the same results.
But it's changed the result, presumably, because from that perspective, I mean, Google's NLP takes capital letters really seriously. Within Kalicube, we analyze using the NLP, and the capitalization can either make a text much clearer or really confuse it, which is a lot of fun. Bill, why don't you ask the next question?
I was thinking about ranking by entities and how Google will, in response to some queries, create a knowledge graph based upon the search results, and rank those entities. And this sounds very similar. It's not just ranking entities, it's building a knowledge graph and having conversation based upon those results. Yeah, so that's the point. Process. That's really the point where I'm trying to go, because the assumption here is that the problem with WordLift is also related to the fact that which in any case is not too bad. It's not as bad as I thought, but we can only improve this if the search results become a knowledge graph with entities. And then if I can pull data for these entities, then it would be easier for BlenderBot to become, more fact-based, and also to get the conversation more into control. Because, of course, the problem is also to have something like this out in the wild that then immediately might lose track of the reality of things and might become even racist, or again introduce biases that we don't want to introduce in a conversation with an AI assistant. So the confidence level needs to be the same with WordLift is with the W, capital W, and then WordLift with the lowercase w. Correct. But also if entities are created, if a knowledge graph is created from the search engine result pages, then we can quickly interlink WordLift with the entity on Wikidata, and then we can get more information. Let's see if this one works.
Yeah. Who is the founder of Wordlift? Ooh, but there are two of you, aren't there? That's going to confuse it.
Yeah. We don't know. Because, of course, yeah, that's one of the things where Google does an amazing work. Okay, that's not bad. He's a great guy.
He's a great guy. I like the fact that it's got this pseudo opinion of you. I mean, I'm sure they've just programmed that in by hand to say, always say everybody's lovely.
So that, yeah, I think this is, for me, is a way of understanding how we can, twist the content and create these graphs so that something like BlenderBot responds.
I love this. It looks like the machine's chatting you up. It's a first date with Andrea Volpini and the BlenderBot too. But could you ask it who is the brand SERP guy with a capital T on the? Because it's something I'm trying to get Google to give me the knowledge panel for who is the brand SERP guy and just show the knowledge panel as a direct synonym with myself. And I'm wondering how close I am in terms of the search results, at least.
I think in this specific implementation, the capitalization doesn't change much.
Oh yeah,
but,
sorry,
but maybe not. I mean,
I'm a bit obsessed about capitalization since I've been writing these descriptions.
Yeah, it is an important aspect, of course.
It's frustratingly slow.
Well, I mean, it is running. Yeah.
I think it's pretty cool. That's all right. But yeah, I mean, it's got that I'm a digital marketer, but it doesn't understand that it's me. So I'm still not there yet.
You still need to make a step, but see, here it's multi-turn, so, and it's retaining the memory of the previous one, so it should change the query in such a way that it combines, the brand SERP guy with the name.
Okay, right. I work with Wordlift, and that is one of the things. Is we were talking about the people also search for, and I've created such a close relationship with Wordlift, both with my company and my own association, in terms of the fact that I work with you guys and we talk a lot, Andrea, and we write a lot together. That relationship is now being seen by Google as being very important, or very close, very strong. And it also means if you search for Kalicube on Google, you get Wordlift in the related searches.
Yeah. I mean, that's totally fair, I think. But yeah, of course. The other point of conversational search, as it is for voice search, we are only considering basically one response, and so competition gets very high because there's only a chance of having one brand SERP guy. There are not going to be multiple results. It's just going to be one response, and either you're in or you're out.
Right. Yeah, well, I've been looking at kind of people like Dr. Mike, who's a doctor in New York, who's apparently incredibly good looking, who actually has a proper name, which is something else that I can't remember off the top of my head. And it recognized the synonym between it. And what was interesting for him is Google was giving, if you search for Dr. Mike, it would give you, he's a YouTube Dr. star. It would give you a result based on YouTube and him as a social media star. If you search for his proper name, which is Mike something, it would give you a result based on his career as a doctor. And I find that incredibly interesting. So I'm hoping one day to have, if you search for Jason Barnard, it shows you the blue dog. And if you search for the brand SERP guy, it shows you the brand SERP digital marketing stuff.
So is this the guy? Dr. Mike is a doctor?
Yeah. Yeah, that's it. And he has what's his real name is the question. I can't remember it. He was one of the daily brand SERPs a few weeks ago, and I've done 170 of them, so I can't remember.
Yeah, he doesn't know. I mean, clearly there is a problem with his real name.
Yeah.
But as you can see...
here we go. It's Mike Warszawiecki, which is why I couldn't remember it. Varshawski. So there you go. Anyway, that was a very interesting live experiment using BlenderBot, chatting Andrea up. Is there anything you guys wanted to say before we leave? Because we've overrun the hour already. And now is the opportunity to round up with whatever you guys have got to say about MUM and multimodal things in general.
I think we have a lot of questions that we didn't answer.
Have we?
We do, but...
We are going to learn a lot once Mom actually lets us have conversations with an assistant, where we can lose ourselves in some of the things, like the examples they've provided with conversations with paper airplanes, or what Pluto is like as a planet. And those conversations are the types of things that it would be fun getting lost in.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds like an amazing way to lose a weekend, because you would go, who is Pluto? What is Pluto? And you'll go into the space, and I would go into Disney cartoons.
Yeah.
Is Pluto really a dog?
Yeah. So you and I sitting next to each other over a weekend asking different questions would demonstrate the differences in our perspectives on the world, and really challenge Google to keep up with us as individuals and help us with our virtual assistant.
So Pluto is a dog. So what is Goofy?
Oh no. Well, thank you so much. Closing comment, Andrea?
Yeah, I mean, we need to keep doing these experiments and try to understand with the help of Bill more about how entities are stitching together different type of content, because I think we have been looking at entities primarily from the textual point of view. But I like that today we, for the first time, we kind of laugh about, Jason Barnard not being recognized without a red shirt, and Wisławski being tracked over time by Google because it's been more into the industry. I think it's more interesting that we're starting to look at the content in a multi-modal way, and that's I think we should do more of these.
Yeah, I agree. I kind of I thought 2 or 3 years ago life was getting really exciting in the SEO world, and it's just getting now this last year or so even more exciting. I'm really looking forward to the next few years, because as Bill said and you said, it's a lot of fun playing with it and trying to figure it out, and losing weekends and delves into experiments and ideas is something we'll be doing for many months to come. Thank you so much to you guys. Thank you, Bill. Thank you, Andrea. Thank you to everybody watching. That was absolutely awesome. I thought that was a great deal of fun. Lots of interesting stuff going on. This was Kalicube Tuesdays with WordLift every month, second Tuesday of the month. Kalicube Tuesdays every week with just Kalicube, with WordLift sponsoring an Ahrefs this month. Thank you very much, Bill. Thank you, Andrea.